Hello, in today's video we will talk about Jeffrey Dahmer, an American serial killer and sex offender. So let's start. Dahmer was born May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the first of two sons of Joyce Annette, a teletype machine instructor, and Lionel Herbert Dahmer, a Marquette University chemistry student and later a research chemist. Lionel Dahmer is of German and Welsh ancestry, and Joyce Dahmer was of Norwegian and Irish ancestry. Some sources report Dahmer was deprived of attention as an infant. Other sources, however, suggest that Dahmer was generally doted on as an infant and toddler by both parents, although his mother was known to be tense, greedy for both attention and pity, and argumentative with her husband and their neighbors. Dahmer had been an energetic and happy child but became notably subdued after double hernia surgery shortly before his 4th birthday. At elementary school, Dahmer was considered as quiet and timid. One teacher later recollected she noticed early signs of abandonment in Dahmer due to his father's absence and mother's illnesses, the symptoms of which increased when she became pregnant with her second child. Nonetheless, in elementary school, Dahmer did have a small number of friends. In October 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. When Joyce gave birth in December, Dahmer was allowed to choose the name of his new baby brother. He chose the name David. The same year, Lionel earned his degree and started work as an analytical chemist in nearby Akron, Ohio. From an early age, Dahmer was interested in dead animals. His fascination with dead animals may have begun when, at the age of 4, he saw his father removing animal bones from beneath the family home. According to Lionel, Dahmer was oddly thrilled by the sound the bones made, and became preoccupied with animal bones, which he initially called his fiddlesticks and quat. He occasionally searched beneath and around the family home for additional bones, and explored the bodies of live animals to discover where their bones were located. In 1968, the family moved to Bath, Ohio. This address was their third in 2 years, and the Dahmers' 6th address since marriage. The home stood in 1.5 acres of woodland, with a small hut only a short walk from the house where Dahmer began collecting large insects such as dragonflies and moths and the skeletons of small animals such as chipmunks and squirrels. Some of these remains were preserved in jars of formaldehyde and stowed within the hut. 2 years later, during a chicken dinner, Dahmer asked Lionel what would happen if the chicken bones were placed in bleach. Lionel, pleased by what he believed to be his son's scientific curiosity, demonstrated how to safely bleach and save animal bones. Dahmer used these saving techniques into his bone collecting, and also he began collecting dead animals including roadkill which he would dissect and bury beside the hut, with the skulls occasionally placed atop makeshift crosses. According to one friend, Dahmer explained to him that he was curious as to how animals fit together and quat. In one instance in 1975, Dahmer decapitated the carcass of a dog before nailing the body to a tree and impaling the skull upon a stick in the woodland behind his house. As a prank, he later invited a friend to view the display, claiming he had discovered the remains by chance. The same year Lionel taught his son how to preserve animal bones. Joyce began increasing her daily consumption of Equinil, laxatives, and sleeping pills, further minimizing her tangible contact with her husband and children. From his freshman year at Revere High School, Dahmer was seen as an outcast. By the age of 14, he had begun drinking beer and hard alcohol in daylight hours, frequently hiding his liquor inside the jacket he wore to school. He mentioned to one classmate who asked why he was drinking scotch in a morning history class that the alcohol he consumed was his medicine and quat. Although largely uncommunicative, in his freshman year, Dahmer was seen by staff as polite and highly intelligent but with average grades. He was a keen tennis player and played briefly in the high school band. When he reached puberty, Dahmer discovered he was gay. He did not tell his parents. In his early teens, he had a brief relationship with another teenage boy, although they never had intercourse. By Dahmer's later admission, he began fantasizing about dominating and controlling a completely submissive male partner in his early to mid-teens, and his fantasies gradually evolved to his focusing on chests and torsos. These fantasies gradually became intertwined with dissection. When he was about 16, Dahmer had a fantasy of rendering unconscious a particular male jogger he found attractive, and then making sexual use of his body. On one occasion Dahmer concealed himself in bushes with a baseball bat and waited for this man. However, he did not pass by on that particular day. Dahmer later admitted this was his first attempt to attack and make an individual submissive to him. Among his peers at high school, Dahmer became something of a class clown who often staged pranks, which became known as doing a Dahmer. These included bleeding and simulating epileptic seizures or cerebral palsy at school and local stores. On occasion, Dahmer would perform these antics for money to purchase alcohol. By 1977, Dahmer's grades had declined. His parents hired a private tutor, with limited success. The same year, in an attempt to save their marriage, his parents attended counseling sessions. They continued to quarrel frequently. When Lionel discovered Joyce had engaged in a brief affair in September 1977, they both decided to divorce, telling their sons they wished to do so amicably. Lionel moved out of the house in early 1978, temporarily residing in a motel on North Cleveland Massillon Road. In May 1978, Dahmer graduated from high school. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers observed Dahmer sitting close to the school parking lot, drinking several cans of beer. When the teacher threatened to report the matter, Dahmer informed him he was experiencing a lot of problems at home and that the school's guidance counselor was aware of them. That spring, Joyce and David moved out of the family home to live with relatives in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Dahmer had just turned 18 and remained in the family home. Dahmer's parents' divorce was finalized on July 24, 1978. Joyce was awarded custody of her younger son and alimony payments. Early 20s, first murder Stephen Mark Hicks. Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978. He was struggling with his own homosexual desires, mixed with his need to act out his sadistic fantasies. Perhaps this struggle is what pushed him to pick up a hitchhiker, 18-year-old Stephen Hicks. He invited Hicks to his father's home and the two drank alcohol. When Hicks was ready to leave, Dahmer bashed him in the head with a barbell and killed him. Dahmer dragged the body to the basement. He then cut up the body, placing the parts in garbage bags, which he buried in the woods surrounding his father's property. Years later, he returned and dug up the bags and crushed the bones and dispersed the remains around the woods. As insane as he had become, he had not lost sight of the need to cover his murderous tracks. Later, his explanation for killing Hicks was simply that he didn't want him to leave. 6 weeks after the murder of Hicks, Dahmer's father and his fiancée returned to his home, where they discovered Jeffrey living alone at the house. That August, Dahmer enrolled at Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. He was mostly skipping classes and he still had drinking problems. Also, he was failing almost all his classes. Even T his father paid in advance for second term, he dropped out. January 1979, his father forced him to enlist in the Army, where he served as a combat medic in Germany from 1979 to 1981. He was supposed to serve for 6 years but was discharged after 2 because of his alcohol abuse. He received an honorable discharge, as his superiors did not believe that any problems Dahmer had in the Army would be applicable to civilian life. On March 24, 1981, Dahmer was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for debriefing and provided with a plane ticket to travel anywhere in the country. Dahmer later told police he felt he could not return home to face his father, so he opted to travel to Miami Beach, Florida, both because he was tired of the cold and in an attempt to live by his own means. In Florida, Dahmer found a job at a delicatessen and rented a room in a nearby motel. Dahmer spent most of his salary on alcohol, and was soon evicted from the motel for non-payment. He initially spent his evenings on the beach as he continued to work at the sandwich shop until phoning his father and asking to return to Ohio in September of the same year. After he returned, he was looking for the job, but he was still drinking heavily and was even arrested. Because father couldn't help him with drinking problems, he sent him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. Dahmer's grandmother was the only family member to whom Dahmer displayed any affection. They hoped that her influence, plus the change of location, might persuade Dahmer to quit drinking, find a job, and live responsibly. He had a few jobs, but still couldn't keep them. He was also still drinking and smoking. He was living of grandmother money. By 1985 he was frequenting gay bathhouses. But during sexual encounters, he was annoyed that his partners moved a lot, so he would drug them and molest them as they lay unconscious. Although he was arrested twice for incidents of public exposure in 1982 and 1986, he only faced probation and was not charged for the molesting. After approximately 12 such instances, the bathhouse's administration revoked Dahmer's membership, and he began to use hotel rooms to continue this practice. Stephen Tuomi was his second victim, killed in September of 1987. Dahmer picked him up from a bar and took him back to a hotel room, where he woke up the next morning to Tuomi's beaten dead body. He later stated that he had no memory of actually murdering Tuomi, implying that he had committed the crime on some sort of blacked-out impulse. He bowed a suitcase and transported the body in his grandmother's basement. He then dismembered body in 2 hours. The killings occurred sporadically after Tuomi, with 2 victims in 1988, 14-year-old Native American male prostitute named James Dockstader, and 22-year-old bisexual man named Richard Guerrero. One in 1989, mixed-race 24-year-old aspiring model named Anthony Sears. 1988, Dahmer's grandmother asked him to move out, largely because of his drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the foul smells occasionally emanating from both the basement and the garage. Dahmer found a one-bedroom apartment at 808 North 24th Street and moved into his new residence on September 25. 2 days later, Dahmer was arrested for an incident at his job at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, where he drugged and sexually fondled a 13-year-old boy. He was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he had lured to his home on the pretext of posing nude for photographs. He was found guilty. On May 23, 1989, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction, with work release permitted in order that he be able to keep his job. He was also required to register as a sex offender. 2 months before his scheduled release from the work camp, Dahmer was paroled from this regiment. His 5 years probation imposed in 1989 began at this point. On release, Dahmer temporarily moved back to his grandmother's home in West Allis. He continued to lure unsuspecting men from bars or solicited prostitutes, whom he then drugged, and strangled. At this point though, Dahmer also began carrying out particularly disturbing acts with their corpses, continuing to use the bodies for intercourse, taking photographs of the dismemberment process, preserving with scientific precision his victims' skulls and genitals for display, and even retaining parts for consumption. Despite regular appointments with his probation officer, he would remain free to commit 4 murders that year and 8 more in 1991. On May 14, 1990, Dahmer moved out of his grandmother's house and into 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213, taking Sears' mummified head and genitals with him. Although located in a high-crime area, the apartment was close to his workplace, was furnished, and at $300 per month inclusive of all bills excluding electricity, was economical. In 1990 he killed 4 victims: Raymond Smith, Edward Smith, Ernest Miller and father of 2 David Thomas. While doing killing, Dahmer was practicing how to save skulls with bleach and not destroying it. He was looking skulls as trophies. Dahmer began killing around 1 person each week by the summer of 1991. He became infatuated with the idea that he could turn his victims into zombies to act as youthful and submissive sexual partners. He used many different techniques, such as drilling holes into their skull and injecting hydrochloric acid or boiling water into their brains. Soon neighbors began to complain about strange noises and awful smells coming from Dahmer's apartment. On one occasion, a lobotomized victim left unattended even made it out onto the street to ask several bystanders for help. When Dahmer returned, however, he successfully convinced the police that the irrational young man was simply his extremely intoxicated boyfriend. The officers failed to run a background check that would have revealed Dahmer's sex offender status, allowing him to narrowly escape his fate for a little while longer. July 22, 1991, Dahmer lured Tracy Edwards into his home with the promise of cash in exchange for his company. While inside, Edwards was then forced into the bedroom by Dahmer with a butcher knife. During the struggle, Edwards was able to get free and escape out into the streets where he flagged down a police car. When the police arrived at Dahmer's apartment, Edwards alerted them to the knife that was in the bedroom. Upon entering the bedroom, the officers found the pictures of dead bodies and dismembered limbs that allowed them to finally place Dahmer under arrest. Further investigation of the home led them to find a severed head in the refrigerator, 3 more severed heads throughout the apartment, multiple photographs of the victims, and more human remains in his refrigerator. A total of 7 skulls were found in his apartment, as well as a human heart in the freezer. An altar was also constructed with candles and human skulls in his closet. After being taken into custody, Dahmer confessed and began divulging the gruesome details of his crimes to the authorities. Dahmer was indicted on 15 murder charges and the trial began on January 30, 1992. Even though the evidence against him was overwhelming, Dahmer pled insanity as his defense due to the nature of his incredibly disturbing and uncontrollable impulses. Following 2 weeks of trial, the court declared him sane and guilty on 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 life terms, for a total of 957 years in prison. In May of the same year, he entered a guilty plea for the murder of his first victim, Stephen Hicks, and received an additional life sentence. Dahmer served his time at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. During his time in prison, Dahmer expressed remorse for his actions and wished for his own death. He also read the Bible and declared himself a born-again Christian, ready for his final judgment. He was attacked twice by fellow inmates, with the first attempt to slice his neck open, leaving him with only superficial wounds. However, He was attacked a second time on November 28, 1994, by an inmate as they cleaned one of the prison showers. Dahmer was found still alive, but died on the way to the hospital from severe head trauma. Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 young men between 1978 and 1991. 12 were killed in his North 25th Street apartment. 3 victims were murdered and dismembered at his grandmother's West Allis residence. His first and second victims were murdered at his parents' home in Ohio and at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee. A total of 14 of Dahmer's victims were from various ethnic minority backgrounds, with 9 victims being black. Dahmer was adamant that the race of his victims was incidental to him and that it was the body form of a potential victim that attracted his attention. These contentions have been supported via an independent forensic specialist's study of Dahmer's victim selection, the anthropological analysis of which revealed his victims shared a morphological similarity and suggesting Dahmer was psychologically attracted to a certain anthropometric body type. That was it for this video, and thank you for watching. If you want me to make video about something else, you can leave comment. See you in the next one. Stay healthy and be careful. I should fuck her in the